Good morning and afternoon to a lot of people on this call. Thanks for joining. It is
Hi,
11
everybody.
o'clock Eastern. Mom, what time is it over in Eswatini?
It's 5 o'clock.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Eh?
Yes, and I
It
think your
always does.
father probably feels that way as himself.
Yeah, he usually does after some of these calls that we have together. So it's my morning and
Yep.
yeah, your afternoon. How's the weather there?
It's actually really hot today. The weather here has been crazy. We're having so much rain and we have a lot of projects on the go, as you know, and rain is good for the farm, but not good for construction and roads. So
Yeah.
we have to, after the rain falls, we have to let everything dry out but it's hot and humid today.
Yeah, when I was there in January, the roads were the worst I think that they've ever been.
Ever.
And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
We just had them graded a little bit and then more rain came. So it's,
yeah.
yeah, not easy.
We'll get a long-term solution at some point. Hopefully,
Neighbors,
longer
yeah,
than, yeah, favorite. Yeah, yeah.
before you move here.
Before I move there, that'd be great. If we get
That'd
that
be
figured out the
great.
next few years. Well, listen, I want to make sure that we get started because we have an hour together. First of all, thank you all for joining this call. This is our second official webinar that we've ever done. And I've had the pleasure of interviewing my dad a few months ago on our vanilla project. And today get to talk to my mom, who I work with way closer than I have in the past. This whole family business thing, working across borders. And since January, I've really been working with her and my dad quite intimately, which has been phenomenal. But it really, they say a day there is like a week of life. And I can attest to that, having been there for 2 or 3 weeks in January, and it felt like a lifetime in a really good way. I will say we got a lifetime. But Mom, if you could, for anybody on the call that isn't familiar with us, I'd like you to introduce yourself, and then I'll do a quick intro, and we'll get into this bridge program.
Sure. I'm Janine Maxwell. I'm Spencer and Chloe's mom. I'm also the mother to 461 Swazi children who call me Mage. And I'm one of the co-founders. My husband and I founded Heart for Africa. And recently I was the chief operating officer. But now Spencer, my host for today, is now the new chief operating officer. And I'm thrilled about that. So I'm focusing on programming here in Eswatini with the kids. So that's at home, that's long-term planning, which is part of today's conversation, and the school and health.
Well said. While I'm pulling this up, why or how long have you been living in Eswatini?
147 years. No. We moved here, we've been here almost 14 years now.
Okay.
And this is home for sure. People often think that I go back to the US, which I do go back to the US to see you and Jane and little baby Beck. But we don't have a home in the US or in Canada. This is home for us, and this is where we will be buried.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. So I want to talk a little bit about this idea that we've been talking about, which is building the bridge. For the last 14 years that you've lived in Eswatini, we have received we've received exactly 461 kids. When we receive those kids, we're making essentially a lifelong commitment, just like you and Dad have made to myself and Chloe, right? They're not your biological children, but for as long as you're here, you will be supportive of myself. And that's a commitment that we've been able to say yes to over 400 kids. Recently, we've had to make the difficult decision to pause our intake of children. And really, that comes down to some of the conversations we've had about this commitment that the kids we have said yes to, if we don't have enough resources to care for those kids because we're taking on other children, really, we're not helping as many people as we'd like to, and be good stewards of what we've committed to for these kids.
Right.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about mom, okay? And we're going to go into the bridge, but you're the mom to over 400 kids. What's that like? Do you know all their names? Like, give us a little bit of day in my life.
Sure. Yeah, no, I know all of their names because there are children. We're the legal guardians of them. Now, I will say at the Kutula place where the tiny babies are, I do struggle there because they're all under 6 months. And so I go to the baby home as often as I can. And often there's a competition between Auntie Kosi and I, who knows more babies' names. But my goal is to always know who they are. I remember their stories, especially if I pick them up, which I've picked up most of them, because if you pick up a child that was found in a pit latrine or an outhouse, or if you pick up a child that was found on the side of the road and has bruising, you never forget that. It's locked in your mind. And often with the person who was there with you, maybe we name the child in honor of someone who's traveling with me. So yes, and I'll tell you, on Sundays, when I sit in church or when I work at the school and I see them walk by, their story walks by me. It's not the child that walks by. And it's so some days are harder than others just to sit and do email at the school.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially when you were there for so many of those baby pickups. And I know you've been training our amazing staff over there to take on some of that, but the stories stay with you. I was fortunate to be on a few baby pickups myself. So let's talk about our oldest kids right now. How old are they? And what has your thought process been as they enter high school?
So our eldest is 15. That's what we have. Yeah, 15 is the eldest. And then our youngest is about 4 months. And as you said, we're not bringing in any more babies. So that's unfortunate. So that small baby home will be empty soon. But when we first started bringing them in, you're dealing with babies and you're dealing with trauma and you're dealing with malnutrition and tuberculosis and HIV. So we weren't really focused. A lot of people say, well, what's going to happen when they become teenagers? What's going to happen when they're in high school? And I'm like, they're 1 or they're 3. Let's get them toilet trained first. And then we can talk about what's going to happen when they hit puberty. We're there now. I get that. But to answer your question, it's kind of like with you and Chloe. You start with you start with the end in mind. You don't have children and then think, oh, I wonder what we're going to do with them. You have, I think almost most couples, certainly who plan to have children, have a purpose. Why do you want to have children? I remember when you guys were in school, you would come home and you'd have lots of friends whose parents, are insisting, they might have been in grade 4, they might have been in grade 6, they might have been in grade 12, but their parents are expecting them to be a doctor. Their parents want them to be a lawyer. Their parents want them to take on the family business. Their parents had plans for their lives. And I think maybe sometimes as a parent, it's hard not to, but that's never the way your dad and I looked at you guys. We wanted you to be contributing members of society. We wanted you to be good people. Chloe loved studying perhaps a little bit more than you did, and her grades were more important in primary school, and that was really a big deal to her. And for other kids, it was a big deal. It wasn't a big deal to me, so I wasn't pressuring that as much, but I wanted you to be honest. I didn't like being lied to. Your moral fiber and your integrity was much more important to Dad and I than what your grades were in school. Now, if you cheated to get good grades, there's the problem, right? That's integrity. So with these kids, it's the same thing. While we do need to be thinking about the future, because we were thinking you guys will probably want to go to university. So how are we going to make sure we have finances for that? Where are we going to live? Are we going to pay in-state, out of state, or both in your case? Thank you, Spencer, for going to Florida State for.
The
But
only circus in
oh my
university has had to
gosh.
do that for a few years. Lost a little flexibility.
Yeah, really, yeah, that was a good one. Anyway, so for these kids, yes, we do need to be more intentional about what does the future look like, and especially now that they're in high school, because now we have 5 years. So it's coming towards us, but we talk about the older kids being the tip of the spear, because it's like being the firstborn. Firstborn learns everything. The parents learn everything about the firstborn. The secondborn kind of gets a bit of a free ride because the firstborn did all the hard work. And I'm sure you would agree with that, Spencer.
I think a lot of people would, but I think a lot of secondborns like Chloe might have something to say, but I get it.
Yeah, that's true. But she's not on this call, is she? No, she's
Oh,
not. Anyway, so we have to be intentional about it, but also look at these children, because some of them have come, some of them are severely disabled. Some of them came in so malnourished and so sick that they're very developmentally delayed. And some of them are rock stars. So how do we, it's easier when you have 2 kids, or 1 kid or 5 kids, but with 461 kids, how do we look at the future and look out at our process and be intentional about having them be the best that they can be? And to us, just as with you, that means living in integrity, being contributing members of society, being kids or adults that people want to hire because they are change agents.
Hmm. Sure. So our oldest right now, the oldest class, I should say, is in eighth grade, which means
Right,
that is actually the first year of high school in Eswatini, right?
correct.
It's a 5-year program. So that means for the next 5 years, these kids will be going through high school. And we've started to think through once they finish high school, what happens? Right.
Right.
So let's go back to when we first started talking about this bridge program. And I know there's a lot of research that you did both on the continent of Africa, but also in North America, looking at things like foster care programs. So what is the model that they use to help, I'm going to say, transition these kids into society? We've also looked at other children's homes in Africa, where we've talked to some of the caretakers and owners of those. And one of the biggest problems that they have is helping assist moving on to that next phase of life. So let's just go back to the beginning when you started thinking about the bridge program.
Well, as you said, we have talked to a lot of people about this. I think anyone who's familiar with the foster care program, in Canada or the United States, there is no, they age out. They turn 18, you're out of the program, and off you go. And I don't think any single person sitting on this call right now knew that they were ready or were ready at 18 years old to just go off and leave. That under circumstances, some people have had to do that. But you and Chloe have been able to be much more successful because you had a supportive family at home. You could go on and further your education. You were still getting counseled. Your brains weren't fully developed yet. So we want to make sure that we assist with that. So one of the first things I started to do when we first started bringing in children is I started asking other homes, how do you do it? What do you do? What happens when they turn 18? Because a lot of the kids, we have several girls' homes here in the country who we're very close to, and their girls are coming in maybe at 9 and they haven't gone to school yet. So they may not finish school until they're 22, 23 years old. So they keep them until they're finished school. And some of them really are trying to have them do post-secondary education, some skills training. But for us, our commitment is to build a bridge between finishing school, which for some kids, it won't be finishing high school. It will be earlier.
Hmm.
But what does that bridge look like to get them from where they finish their education across the bridge to their brains being fully developed, being again contributing members of society, whether that's on Project Canaan within the country, and how do we continue to give them support, even though we can't keep them here for through adulthood.
Right. So I think that's helpful, and we're going to go into more detail around what this bridge program looks like. But to be clear, the problem is, or I guess the problem that we're trying to address with this bridge program can be summed up that we don't want to have a kid go to our front gate with a suitcase. And we say, good luck. You
Yeah,
finish high school. Whether
yeah,
you graduated from high school, whether you didn't and you just had to end early, we want to help them. Right. And when we think about the finish line for us, right, imagine if we spent 18 years raising these kids and then they go out and they're living in poverty. It's
right.
almost,
We
what
would have
was the point of
failed.
those?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we would have
And
failed miserably.
absolutely.
And
And
also, what's different, sorry to interrupt, Spencer, but what's different about our kids is because we only accept abandoned babies, like a lot of other children's homes or orphanages have children that come in, they're brought in through social welfare because there was abuse going on at home or something's happened. But family comes and visits them. They're very intentional about trying to keep them connected with family. Sometimes those kids go home at Christmas. In fact, a lot of homes, the kids go home at Christmas if there's a home to go to. But in our case, of our 461 children, we probably only have 10 that ever have a visitor because our children were found, the babies were found abandoned, or
right.
the mother was 12 or 13 years old and there isn't a homestead to go back to. And of course, HIV is still wiping out the nation. So our children don't have that backup that, okay, at least I know my family, they live in Gabani and I can take my suitcase there.
Yeah.
Ours don't have that.
Well, like we said, Mage and Babe, right? I mean, this is their home and this is all they've known for their entire lives. I think you guys do a phenomenal job to take our kids out on community excursions and volunteer trips for those kids to show them, hey, this is, our life on Project Canaan is a lot better than it could have been in some of these circumstances. And it's a hard reality for our kids to understand. Oh no, that wouldn't have been me.
Right.
It's like, well, it very well could have been. And that's what we want to work on, this learning, especially as they're young and they're starting to talk, then up through high school. So
Talk.
let's, yeah,
Talk back.
but yeah, throw stones. A lot of what is
They're
it?
teenagers now.
The glue, the head glue. We go through a lot of head glue.
We go through a lot of head glue, yes.
So I want to talk about the two phases, if you will, of the bridge program. For everybody on this call, just a little bit of context. When we think about the bridge, these children will be anywhere from about 17 years old up to potentially 23 years old. And we're throwing darts here. We're thinking through this, and my mom in this new program officer role is really dedicated to figuring out a lot of these things. But I want to talk about the internship year first, Mom. When we think about this transition into the bridge, how does this internship program work, and what are some of the goals? And I'm going to share my screen. We could go through this if you'd like.
Sure. So the internship year, when our kids finish high school, I mean, this is a bubble. And I say that it can be derogatory, but I certainly mean it in a good way. Because even though we take the kids out, we visit in the communities, we try to expose them, we take them on public transportation, try to expose them to the world. But it is a dangerous world out there. This can be a very dangerous country for children or for young people. And so we have to do that with a lot of intentionality. We want to keep them safe. But what we'd like to be able to do at the end of that year of high school, and they're finished and they've just spent their whole lives here, is give them what we used to call a gap year. So they don't have to move yet. So they get to stay in their dormitory, which will be all of the older kids anyway, because they're living together, and they get to stay there for a year. And they have a few different options. It's 1 year in, as you can see on the screen, 1 year, they stay there. Or let's say there are people in the United States, I have no doubt that there are people who are listening to this right now who would say, I would love to have one of the kids come and stay with us for a year. I would love to have them come, and I have a landscaping company and I'd love to have them come and learn for a year. Or I'd like to maybe take that child and maybe with my siblings, I'm a doctor and she's a nurse and they're a teacher, and have that child come and live with different families for a year. So either they're staying here or they're living with a host family, or they go on a program like Adventures in Missions. There's lots and lots of programs like that. We'll need some help to start researching that. We would need funds for that, for them to go and do a study abroad. But I have no doubt as the kids get older and we start having mentors, and again, people listening on this call, we're going to be looking for mentors starting next year to be able to meet with our kids by video on a regular basis to help them start thinking through their future and where they want to go. So I believe that the Lord will supply the funds when we need it, but that's really looking at that 1 year to give them time to breathe. And then also with the curriculum, they need to learn budgeting. They're already learning that in school now, but they need to learn how to cook. Their meals are being prepared for them. They help in the cooking now, but they need to learn how to cook a meal for themselves. Transportation. The spiritual mentorship, what does the church service look like? Or small groups as they get older? What are they going to need? Their needs are going to be different than they are now. And then career development as well, exploring, what's possible. They'll be doing a lot of that beforehand, through high school, but obviously honing into that as they're getting older.
Sure. So when we think about kids finishing the internship program, I really like the life skills. Like you said, in high school, our high school curriculum is already going to be different than what I had years ago and kids right now in North America, just the things that we're going to be talking about. So, for example, including cooking classes. And I recognize there's some high schools that do that as an elective. But we want to be really intentional because these kids, while we do trips to, say, the grocery store where they have money and they have a budget of 100 rand to go buy snacks, they're not going to the grocery store as frequently as I'm taking Beth right now, where they see, oh, I'm paying with my phone or a credit card, or what is credit versus a debit card. We have to be way more intentional about teaching them things like a checkbook. Now, I don't know if we'll still be using those by the time that these kids need to, but it's really important for them to understand how those things work. And while we in North America get exposed to a lot of those things just by going to church every Sunday, potentially, these children don't necessarily know these things. And so things like getting your driver's license. I think Piwa was one of our first to be behind the wheel, right? That was months ago.
Terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, yeah, on our soccer pitch. And I think that's awesome. And we have some great trainers to do that. Okay,
Well, and
so
Spencer, when we first started talking about the driver's license, we actually have a few young people who work here on the farm who grew up at other children's homes here in the country. You and Chloe grew up with them, in fact. And so we've met with them and also some of our friends from the home in Kenya that we partnered with. And we sat down with them as adults and said, what are some of the things that you didn't know when you left the home? And they gave us a whole list of things, like they didn't know how to use public transportation, didn't know, understand manners, and Swazi manners versus maybe if you're going to be in hospitality, Western manners. But the one thing that really stood out to us was one of the young men, we said, we want to make sure that they have their driver's license, at least in that gap year, if not before. And he looked at us with his eyes open and his jaw dropped. And he said, if they have a driver's license, they have a job. You've just given them a job. And it was such a big aha moment for us because that just seems so simple. For you and Chloe, you want your driver's license so you can go over to your friend's house. But he's saying they're just they're in short supply right now. And with our Lucido mechanic shop, and teach them how to change a tire, change your oil.
Yeah, and I think the driver's license is a perfect example for these things. Things like having a passport, a simple bank account, right?
Yeah.
I know when we first started Project Canaan, there was times I would be over there and we were doing payroll, and we had stacks of cash that we were counting out like Monopoly money by hand for hundreds of employees because no one had a bank account.
It was
right?
crazy.
It was crazy, and since then we have brought banking professionals to come and help us set up checking accounts for these people, but that's something else we could do for these kids, right? Regardless of which path during the bridge that they want to select, right?
They all need a bank account.
There's table stakes, right, of things that they need. So let's talk about, they finished this internship year and I call it like officially entering the bridge program because they have selected which path that they want.
Right.
Let's talk about some of these paths. And maybe before we get into that, talk through your mindset. Like, you're making assumptions here that not every kid's going to go to university, right? Let's talk a little bit about your thought process behind how do we even start to think about there's a few select groups, and I'll share my screen in a moment to go through details.
So several years, like 4 years ago, in fact, I wanted to try to get my head around this question. And because people are asking, like people ask me all the time, what's going to happen when, what's going to happen when? And honestly, I have no idea. We're, as you often refer to, we're making the sausage. Like everybody who's on this call right now is watching the sausage gets made. And, we need input on that. We need thought leaders on that and practical things as well. But I thought, okay, let's just start with our grade 4-3-2 class. And so I went and I met with the people who live with the kids, the senior people and the aunties and uncles, and said, okay, if we divided this into 5 different areas, that the children could go to university, so 4-year degree, or they would get a diploma, so a 2-year, so that might be a teaching, a nurse. Of course, they could go to a 4-year nursing program, but you can become a nurse in 2 years. And then you have your tradespeople. We have not all, but this is a magic place for teaching trades, and the world needs tradespeople. I mean, the easiest way to get a job is be a plumber or an electrician or a mechanic. I mean, the world needs them everywhere. So you've got your trades, then you've got your kids who are just going to get a job. We want them to be able to prepare, get themselves ready in the morning, get to job on time, be an honest worker, put in a full day's work, be able to go to the grocery store, buy their food, go back home. And then the 5th one is our severely disabled children who will be needing full-time care for the rest of their lives. So that's how so I sat down with the staff, went through that, and then I went to the teachers. And, teachers are a different breed because they say they should all go to university and they're all very smart. And I'm like, okay, and I might pull up an example of a child and they're like, well, maybe that one's not going to go to university. So I compared notes and we went through and we gave the child an A, a B, a C, a D, or an E, combined it with them. And so again, this is not scientific, but it was an interesting challenge. So we had this data, we broke it down, and then we went and wrote this up, and we're going to show the screen in a second. We've gone back through now and done this again this year. So we're just getting the data back now. We were pretty close for at grade 4 to what we're learning in grade 8. But it's looking better, actually. We have more kids who are more likely to go to university, and they had 4 more years of learning. So that's encouraging.
Right.
Again, we're going to need the funds to go to university. So just because they have the aptitude doesn't mean they're going to go to university. That's another part of the challenge.
It's the same in the US and Canada, right? I mean, that's why people are taking out student loans, and that's just the reality of anybody. You know, a lot of people want to go to university, but they just don't have the funds to do so. So let me talk through this math, because you're going to see it in a moment on the screen. So when my mom was talking about going through and understanding our children, it's important to have a rough estimation of how many kids, for example, might be going to university versus getting a job. And this is important because we need to figure out, what does our high school curriculum look like? If we go into that assuming 100% of our children are going to university, then we would want to teach them accordingly to prepare for an SAT or an essay or an ACT, as an example. If we assume 50% are going to university, well, then what's the consideration for all the other kids? What are those things? Not that kids would be learning differently, it's the bulk of the curriculum behind what is being taught. So it's geometry and chemistry. Are those things that everybody needs to take, or do those become the electives, considering things like budgeting courses and whatnot? So those are some of the numbers that you're going to see here. And Mom, I want you to go through, you explained the process here, but maybe you could go through each path with these considerations of how many kids were rough assumptions.
Sure. Yeah. So, excuse me. Oh, it is the end of the day and I'm suffering from allergies still. So at the top, we'll look at the university bound. So this is the percentage from 4 years ago. I will say we've combined grade 7, our current grade 8 class is a combined class. So we're actually, that number for university has gone up, I think, to a little over 20%. But back then, we've got this little guy, we're not labeling, so please don't, send hate mail on that, but his name is Nathan. Everybody knows Nathan. Everybody who knows Nathan knows he's really, really smart. He walks around with 3 books. He's always reading. He's one of those kids that, will trip over his own feet or trip over a rock because he's reading on the way to school. And sometimes, isn't even paying attention in school because he's reading. Super smart. He needs to go to university because he's going to change the world. So that would be that. We think that he and 17% of the kids are likely heading that direction. So we want them to go to university, follow that path. And then 32% of the kids, and you see Rose there. Now, Rose probably has the potential to go to university, but here's the difference when we combine what the teachers are saying and what the home is saying is Rose is very, very, very shy. And she wants to be a nurse. And so her personality doesn't really match with her going off to university in South Africa, because most of the kids wouldn't go to university here, would be South Africa or somewhere in Southern Africa. They can get really good education there. But Rose wants to be a nurse, and she can get her nursing diploma here in the country, which would make more sense. And then 1 to 2 years, and then she's finished that. She does an internship, and right now she's saying she wants to work in our clinic. So how fun would that be? Mm-hmm. Below there, we have Paul. Paul and Ish are a set of twins. They are characters. Anybody who knows Paul and Ish, they're hilarious. And they're always pretending they're the other one, but now they're old enough. We know who you are, Paul. We know you're not Ish. And they will be great in the trades. They're not strong in some of the core classes, but they're inquisitive, they're creative, they love to draw. So I can definitely see them heading down, and they don't test well, they're not doing well grade wise, but they're the life of the party. They would be great in hospitality, and we just need to keep them alive to get them through that phase, because they're a little bit crazy, but fun crazy. And then we have Daniel, who we love Daniel. And Daniel doesn't do well in school. He had a rough start to life, but he is the hardest worker. So if Daniel gets in trouble at school and you say, you're going to be suspended and we're going to send you home to work, he's the happiest guy on earth because he loves to work. So I could see Daniel working down in the Lucito shop in the mechanic shop, cleaning cars. Every single time he sees me, which is almost every day, he says, Mage, can I wash your truck? Mage, can I wash your truck? So he's got a work ethic that is excellent, and he's a hard worker. And then we've got our little friends down at the bottom who will need full-time care. It's about 3% of the kids. Now we have a lot of small children from babies up to, who aren't quite in school yet, who do have more significant disabilities than the older kids. But I think most of them they won't necessarily need full-time care. They might need part-time care, but I think that they will be employable in one way or another.
Yep. No, I think that's a really good overview of how, the approach that you took to understand, like, what does this curriculum need to look like in high school? But also considering that times are not only changing around the world, around, the value of education and the need for people like mechanics and carpenters, right? Which is a huge reason why, when we think through the different business departments on Project Canaan, like the farm, like Lasito Mechanic Shop, like Kafunza Carpentry Center, how do we design them in a way that has these vocational training opportunities built into them, right? So we could train our own kids, but also for the community as well. I'm happy to say we will have our first graduating class in June of this year from Lasito Mechanic Shop, which is the first, I believe, 6 adults that went through and got their certification to become mechanics.
And it's actually the new mechanic Lasito Training Institute now.
Because I like it.
Yes. Yeah.
No, I think that's really cool. So you can see, for everybody on this call, you can see that, I mean, I would say we're trying our best here to understand, think through all of as many challenges that we see coming up as possible. They'll need a driver's license. If they want to go to university, well, they're going to need to apply to that university and do interviews. And are they in person? Well, there's logistics behind that. What if someone wants to find a job? So that's why this first year of the internship program, they're going to be focusing on those general things that they need to learn, like budgeting. But we're also going to spend a lot of time going through each one of these paths so the children have as much information as possible to make a decision on, hey, which one of these do I want to go to? I imagine they're 18 years old, they're legal adults, they need to make the decision of what the next thing is. But we also recognize that people make mistakes, and maybe you went to university and you want to drop out of university, right? How do we think through what that looks like? So, Mom, when we think through the kids that have exited the Bridge program, we've talked about how Project Canaan has been their home for their whole lives. What would a Christmas look like? Have you thought about bringing kids back or letting them back on the property? What if when they have families and they have their own kids and they want to show them, where I grew up? What does that look like? Have you thought about that?
Spencer, this stuff spins through my head all day long. It just spins and spins and spins. And then I, try to get back to my other jobs. But as Mage, you live in Michigan, Chloe lives in Dubai. And I want you to, the question is, where's home? Home is where you are with your wife and your son. My answer to you both is home is where Mom is, because I want you to come back here. But as long as I'm alive, I will be Mage to them, and I want them to be able to come back. Now, I don't have room for them to all come sleep in our house, so there are questions around that. So to answer your question about when they're on the bridge, the way I see it working, and we have time and we can even change it as we go, but I would see while they're still on the bridge, whether it's the 1 year or the 5 years, they would be welcome to come back on school breaks. They would be welcome to come back if they're in school. If they're not in school, they would come Christmas breaks, they come back for Easter. If they are not in school or they finish that, then they would be finished the bridge part with us. So let's say Rose gets her nursing degree. She's finished the bridge, and it took her 2 years to finish. So then we need to look, we have 5 different areas that we want to be focusing on, and I'll just read them off to you because, again, being intentional. It's the on the bridge and post bridge, the spiritual care and mentoring, it's life skills training, it's career development, transitional housing is a big one, and church and community support. We want these kids to succeed and be the best that they can be. And as you said, if we've done this for 18 years and then we send them out the front door, we have failed. We failed the country, we have failed our donors, and most importantly, we failed the kids. So we want them to be able to finish the answering your question. So if they then go get a job, let's say they just get a job. So they do their 1-year mentorship, and then Daniel is able to go down and get a job at Lucito, then he would actually move into staff housing. He wouldn't stay on the bridge. His time would be
Right.
off the bridge because he's got a job. So the time on the bridge and in the housing and being welcomed back depends on how long you're still under our umbrella as such. But
Yeah.
Christmas, I would like them all to be able to come back. I'd love for them to be able to bring their families and their children. They wouldn't be able to stay on property if they're married and or have children, but maybe they stayed in Quiniani. Maybe we have a hotel by then that we're running a hospitality program that they can stay in. And we have, I mean, our kids would do so well in the hospitality industry.
Right. I totally agree. And just thinking through, something you just said about, let's say Daniel gets a job at the CETO, right? He becomes an employee at that point. And so we do have staff housing. We also have employees that live out in the community that commute to work. We provide transportation for that. Daniel might also get a job in Manzini or Mabon or somewhere. And part of that would say, okay, Daniel, you're going to need to pay rent for an apartment. What does that look like? Do you need credits to rent an apartment? Right. And that's why that first year of internship is so important, to talk through the implications of these decisions. Now, most people on this call have been 18 years old, and it's hard to wrap your head around all of the things that life throws at you. I'll speak for myself. And yeah, you're going to make mistakes. That's okay. But we want Project Canaan to, just like mom and dad, right? Like, you guys wanted to support me, but I could just sleep on your couch indefinitely. Let me put it politely. We want to make sure that these kids have the resources that they need to transition into society, but it can't be too comfortable where they're like, hey, I just want to stay on Project Canaan for the rest of my life.
We're going to sell the couch.
We wouldn't have prepared them for the realities of life.
Right.
Well,
and it's
if
hard.
that's something, oh my gosh, it's hard. Especially when you see the opportunity.
It's hard everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. When you see the lack of opportunities or opportunities in the country, or, another thing we've talked about is that we don't want all of our kids to just leave and go to other countries in Africa to get jobs.
Right.
Like, that also doesn't lift up this country we've been called towards, right?
Yeah.
So I want to go, we've had some questions coming in the chat, and thank you everyone for following along on this, the story of the bridge. One of the questions was around mentorship. If you want, and you're listening, go to the chat function or the Q&A, and please add in some questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. One of the questions was around mentorship. And it's along the lines of, would we be open to university clubs or students becoming mentors for the kids? And I think that's a really cool way to approach this, especially with the energy of university students. Can you share a little bit more around some of the ideas you have for what a mentorship program could look like, or what are you trying to get out of it?
Well, what I can tell you, what I've thought about is what I don't want it to be, more than what I want it to be. Because I think, again, with intentionality, which is how we function, we need to be intentional about what it is. What I don't want it to be is, online predators. Like, everyone's greatest fear that, okay, I'm going to be your mentor, but now we're secret emailing each other. And now I bring my friend into it. And now there's, silly business. So part of what we need to make sure is that we know who the mentors are, they're trusted, and maybe there's what kind of oversight will that require, because it'll require people. But I also know there's I think hundreds of people who would love to mentor our kids. And maybe it's a partner thing. So there's two of them for one child. One is more on the education side or the career side, and the other is more on the spiritual side. So so I don't know exactly, I don't know what it would look like, and I don't really know I don't have a program yet, but I see it being very what's the word? Inspirational for the kids, opening up their minds to new ideas, because you're only as good as the ideas that you have seen. Bringing other expertise, bringing experience, world knowledge, life knowledge. I think that's what I see in the internship, certainly in the first couple of years before we're heading towards, okay, now really what path are you going down? But it does make me nervous.
Yeah, and I think, Mama Bear is always going to be there. And
Yeah,
at the end of the day, there's a lot of kids that we
yeah,
need to have oversight for versus just
yeah,
Spencer and Chloe.
yeah,
But I know there's a lot of child sponsors out there that have been sponsoring kids for a long, long time.
yeah.
And I've been talking to some that say, what else can I do? And I
Mm.
think this whole mentorship program is really something there, for people that have really said, hey, I want to say yes to these kids and I want to come
Yeah,
alongside them. And I think it would be so cool if we could get these kids internships all over the world and,
yeah,
back and, come to the US to live with the family. And that really starts when you know the person. And so I think
yeah,
mentorship
yeah.
programs, yeah. So if you're interested, the person that asked that question about university clubs, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to chat a little bit more about what that could look like from the North American side.
And the kids would love it. They have so many
Yeah,
questions. When visitors come and they get a chance to just sit down with you one-on-one. Well, that rarely happens because there's like 6 kids or 10 kids that want to sit down and talk. They just ask a million questions. So it would be a wonderful experience for a mentor as well.
yeah. So let's talk about one of the questions is around scholarships within the country. And I know we haven't gone too far down the rabbit hole on what universities can offer, but can you talk a little bit about the education system or universities in country versus South Africa?
Um, well, I don't want to be controversial and so I would just say that I think the universities in South Africa would be probably a better fit for most of our kids, but there would be some of our kids. I mean, the agricultural school here is good. There's theology schools here that are good. So I have no doubt that there are some good universities here. I don't know about scholarships. Haven't looked into that, but I know there's a lot of South African universities that do have scholarships.
Right. And actually, something that when I was there in January, one of the conversations I was having was with a man that owns a construction company, and there was conversations around we will pay to go get vocational training done at the Sita mechanic shop, and we will hire every single person that could come out of there
Yeah, yeah,
because we
yeah.
know that the education is so good. So whether it's scholarship or providing opportunities like that to go learn a specific trade or potentially university or some internship, right? Like a true internship for 6 months at a company. I think a lot of people would be interested in that. Another idea that we've had specifically for the university path, and it's just a conversation we have every few months, or it's probably longer than that, is around what would an annuity look like? An
Mm,
annuity where we have, imagine, millions of dollars that is being invested, and we're able to pay for the education of these kids through the interest that those investments take. Well,
mhm.
that sounds great, but we're trying to build capital projects on Project Canaan now, right? And so if anybody on this call, if that hits a heartstring and you know anything about what that could look like please feel free to reach out to me to talk about that. But there's just a lot that we have to get to before we even get to the
Yeah,
bridge program,
yeah.
right?
We need to
And
start
Mom, I know
accepting children again. Start saving lives again.
where we started the call. Yeah, absolutely. And that's so important. Um, Okay, so let's see. You do the volunteer trips with people from Canada and the US twice a year. Is it possible to set up volunteering weeks where the kids who grew up on Project Canaan could come back and mentor for a week for those that are close to
Oh, I
entering the
love
bridge?
that.
I think that's a great idea.
Love that idea. Yes, that's gonna
Um,
be right there.
Mom, can you talk a little bit about how some of our kids go down to the baby home and they're helping caretake for some of the little ones?
Yeah, so once the kids, at each birthday, they might get a gift that's a thing. There might be an experience like going on a game drive so that they're not just always getting a thing. And then there's rites of passage. So
Hmm.
our 15-year-olds, their rite of passage is they get to go and play. We have one Xbox and they
Hmm.
have the privilege of going and playing on the Xbox. I think it's at 13 that they have the privilege of going down to the baby home because no one's allowed at the baby home because the babies they bring down cooties and then everybody's sick or they have diarrhea, you know, probably a little bit too much information, but basically they get the privilege if they want to. Now, some of the kids are like, I don't want to go down with the babies, but it's funny. We have a lot of boys who like
Hmm.
Ben loves going down and hanging out with the babies. And we're not allowed to have any favorites. Everybody who comes here, no favorites. But if I say to Ben, okay, I know you're not allowed to have any favorites, but who's your favorite? And he'll say, oh, it's, Ellie. Ellie's so cute because she's this. So they love that. We have a number of kids. I mean, Rose always wanted to be she wanted to be a childcare person. Now she's moved on to being a nurse, which I think is great. And I recently said to her, you're 15 years old now. If you want to, after school or on the week, or not on the weekends because they're not open, but if you want to volunteer down at the clinic, like on school holidays, I can set that up for you. Let's get you in there and see if you like what the nurses do. Because,
Mm,
there's a lot of vaccines given and a lot of babies crying. So maybe, is that your thing?
mm,
But the older girls are now going down to visit the 3-year-olds who live at Mseni 1. And they're really helping because 3-year-olds, and there's 40 of them, and they're crazy. And so they're now going down on Saturdays and helping the aunties with these 3-year-olds who are working on balance and somersaults and everything. And they're just loving it. We're so thankful.
mm. This what you're talking about kind of teaching our kids and exposing them. It reminds me of people that grew up on a farm here, where your parents are
Yeah.
farmers. And it's like you learn how to milk a cow because we have cows
Yep.
here, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's we have a lot of kids that need caring for. Another thing that you've started doing is having the kids work on the farm, right? And like picking avocados. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, because of all this rain, we've had a lot of weeds growing fast. So the weeding was the first thing. Maganda, who is our farm manager, he wanted to hire a bunch of outside people to come in and do the weeding. And I said, hang on a second. This was over school break. I said, I've got a lot of young hands who can go down and weed. And I grew up, I worked in my mother's garden, both at home and we just worked, and you and Chloe were raised to be workers as well. We're just busy workers. So I'm like, okay, I send them down. So we sent 80 kids, 80 of the oldest kids down, and they weeded the fields for about 2 hours, and it was hot, miserable day. They took their water and they had their sun hats. But Maganda said they did a better job than anyone that he's hired before.
Hmm.
Because they're taught to do things right. They're taught, and we had staff down there with them. And no, if that's not what you're supposed to do, teach them first, and then do it with them. Watch how it's done, correct where you need to. And Maganda will take our kids to weed any day. So then we have all these avocado trees, which some of you on this call probably helped plant or helped fund 4 years ago. And now 500 avocado trees have come into bloom and fruit. So I want to get my goal is that all of our kids get half an avocado every day while they're in season. Let's just get all that really nice fruit into them. And there's a process. So the first time I said to Maganda, I'll send my kids down. So we sent down, I think it was maybe 30 or 40 kids. And I went down and saw him afterwards. I said, how did it go? He said, oh, it was a disaster. Why is that?
Yeah.
Well, they're throwing avocados at each other and they're throwing rocks, and some of them are fooling around, and they're not taking it very seriously. So he's going to hire people. I said, no, give us another chance. Let us try again, because these kids can be good. We just need to select the kids. So they chose a team leader who, if you would guess, it's Emmanuel. And then I think 10 other kids who are very serious. We got them the clippers. And I said, also choose kids who might end up working in I can see someone like Emmanuel actually running the farm, and then people like Daniel working for him. And I might come back and just touch on that in a minute. But having them work together and teaching them how to cut, there's a specific length that you have to cut this, and then there's 4 different kinds of avocados that we have. And so make sure that this is a Haas, this is a this. So all of them knew what the different kinds of avocados were, so that they could also sort them appropriately. And these kids are 12 and 13 years old, 12 to 14. And they had a ball. They want to go back. And then Maganda said, I'd like some of them to come down and come down twice a week into the vanilla in the greenhouse and start me mentoring them on the vanilla, which, would be your father's dream come true.
Yeah. No, I think that would be awesome. What I love about this is that we're exposing kids to these opportunities now, and we'll continue to do it for their internship years. So that way, the first time they're picking a weed isn't when they're 18 years old, right? And some 12-year-old kids are like, this isn't for me.
Right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I'd rather wash a car. I'd rather go work with my hands at mechanic. I want to work at Kutsala. I love the colors of the beads. We're getting exposure early for the kids to be able to select, which will help when the bridge program choices come up, and hopefully they'll have a little bit more of an understanding of what they want to do with their life, right? At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, we also do shadowing. We started this over the Christmas break so that the kids, we would break up the older kids and we'd send them in groups of 2 and send them out for 4 hours, like maybe with Walter the electrician, with Dennis, who's head of maintenance. And they just rode along with them. And then whatever Walter was doing, if they were changing light bulbs or if they were fixing a fixture or if they were removing the garbage, the kids went with them. And they had, again, the best day. Our kids love to learn. They're just sponges. And our team leaders, our heads of department loved working with them. So they all said, I'd have them back any day. So that's encouraging, because young teenagers aren't always cooperative.
100%. I think that makes sense. And I think we're gonna have some kids that are wanting to do things and some kids that won't. So
yeah, and I won't name those ones.
No, as long as it's not your club.
No.
So listen, hey, I'm really thankful that we got to do this together, and just start to talk with people that are interested. Like you have continuously said, a lot of people have been asking this question. Well, what happens to the kids when they're 18, right?
Just a teenager. What are you going to do when they become teens, when their hormones rage?
Right. Yeah.
Different answers.
And there's a lot of questions, right? And very reasonably so, but I appreciate what you are doing, and especially now that we can work together as you're the program officer to really think through what do these next years look like for these kids. And I think I speak for everyone on this call that we're thankful that this calling has happened. God is doing so much in this country and through us and through everybody that's on Project Canaan. And I just ask everybody on this call, if there's something that you heard that was particularly interesting or inspired you, like reach out, let's talk about it. Because this whole year we're trying to be as transparent as possible, not only with the decisions that are made, but how those decisions are made. And that's why we want to talk about the Bridge program and do a webinar like this. So if there's topics that come to mind that you'd love to hear more about, please feel free to reach out and we'll do another webinar. But Mom, any last words before we wrap up?
Well, I have a question for you. Can people continue to leave comments on once this is finished to let us know what they learned or something that they found interesting?
I'm not sure, but listen, for the people that are on this call, if you want to go to the chat function, just up at the top of the screen, please feel free to share something you learned, or if there was an interesting tidbit. Yeah, I think that'd be great feedback.
And I just want to say thank you to everybody. I really appreciate your time. I've seen some of the names pop up, and it's fun to see people from Diane Wilson in Canada to Pat Brink in South Africa. We love you. We appreciate your prayers, your support, and and Karina from Vienna. So hi from Austria. Hi to Austria. So this is fun. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Spencer and Chloe, for everything that you do and for being the perfect children.
Yeah. Well, this is
You're
recording,
great
so
role
I have that
models.
now. That's great. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and we look forward to chatting with you again soon. Thanks for taking the time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.